Are we live? That's Public Enemy. You know Public Enemy? Are we live?
Vaguely.
Are we live? Vaguely. This time around, people, the revolution will not be televised. Step. We have you for your viewing pleasure, but you nobody's watching yet, right? So I can just act ridiculous. Is anybody watching? I don't think they are. We have for you the big star of the Non-Sequitur Show. Yeah, you thought it was Steve. It isn't. It's Kyle, the big star of the Non-Sequitur Show. Kyle Curtis.
Who
Woo!
who
Woo!
who would think that would be Steve?
Would any Cirrus would probably think it was Steve. Cirrus would
Good,
go, no, it's Steve. It's the
good,
big star.
good,
We're not saying. Everybody else would be like, no, it's Kyle.
good point.
Everybody else would have it straight.
Well put.
Cirrus would get it wrong.
Straight is not something that I do very well.
No, you do not. But we will get into that as the show progresses. Introduce yourself. Everybody probably knows who you are, but tell us who you are.
They probably don't. And if they don't, it's a good thing. It's good for their health, good for their blood pressure. If you do know who I am, then I'm the person responsible for massive face palming, angry flat earthers, pseudoscience aficionados. If you don't know what non sequitur is, just stay that way. Don't go anywhere near the channel.
Don't even. You don't want to know because it's non sequitur. Okay, so the first thing I want to start with is I saw some of your comedy act. So you posted a link to it, I guess, on the non sequiturs. What's the deal with that? How'd that go? Start with that.
Well, I was going through some of my old things on jump drives, and I found several of my very first early stand-up comedy routines. And when I was in high school, I was the first. I think class like it was the first year they started doing senior projects, which is a thing they do widely now, where you have a set thing that you work on your entire senior year. So some
Right.
people would work on restoring cars. Some people, did farming. Some people did, if they were wanted to go to medical school, they shadowed a doctor. But you had to get a mentor. You had to have a presentation, or you had to produce something. And it was basically you were learning a trade or something that you were really interested in. And a lot of people did restoring cars. They would get an
Yeah.
old chopper and do that. Well,
Fireman, football player.
yeah, exactly. I was fascinated by the Johnny Carsons and David Letterman and those guys, and just love stand up. Bill Hicks was one of my idols, still is one of my idols, even though he morphed into Alex Jones, which is a tragedy in itself. But I chose to do my own stand up, and I was a senior in high school, and I called up there were two comedy clubs in my hometown, the Funny Bone and the Comedy Zone. I called up the
Right.
Comedy Zone, and I didn't get anything back. But I called up the Funny Bone, and the manager there said, yeah, we'd love to do that. Let's do it. So that's a commitment for like a year. So on the weekends, I literally got to spend every weekend in a comedy club with some of the funniest, big names would come through there, but I just got to sit and hang out and watch the comedy. And
Wow.
yeah, and that was, you had to spend so many hours a week with your mentor and on your project. So all of these counted towards my hours.
High
And I was
school credit? High school credit for that.
yeah, well, it was part of the project. If you don't pass your senior project, you don't get your diploma. So this is like a huge deal. And my presentation, or what my actual physical product would be, was I put on a Johnny Carson style show for the entire school called the school night show, and we sold tickets, raised money for Relay for Life. I had a bunch of the comedians that were local that would come through the comedy club onto the that Johnny Carson style show that I did, and it was fantastic. And so the manager said, "All right, look, we spent all this time with you. We did all of this mentoring. I want you to come up and watch one more show at the Funny Bone, and then we can part ways, or you can still come up or whatever." But anyway, there was no obligation there because the project was over. So I went on a Tuesday, and I walked in like I normally did, sat at my normal table, and the manager came and said, "I need to talk to you in the office for a second." And so I go in the office,
Oh, and he's
and
going to tell you that you could be a star. He's going to tell you you're really good, or
well,
no?
not quite.
Okay.
He, you know that saying, if you want to learn how to swim, throw him in the deep end.
Yes.
Well, he said, okay, you know all those hours that we spent up here together. Do you know all the tickets that I comped for you and your friends? You know, all the green room meetings with those comedians, just naming off every perk that he had given me as part of this project. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I'm going to need you to pay me back for that. And I said, what do you mean pay you back for that? And he said, okay, you got two options. All right. You can either pay me the money that all of that comes up to, or you can get your ass up on that stage tonight and we'll call it even. And
Cool. Did you
yeah.
freak out?
Oh, yes. I was going crazy. I mean, that's probably the most nervous I've been in my entire life, because it's a packed house. I think there was 175 people there, and I've never been on a stand-up comedy stage before. That's a different, kind of element. You're
Right.
if you don't command that stage when you first get on there, then the audience will eat you alive. So I had a couple of jokes that
Yeah, I'll bet.
we had written for my show that I did at the high school, but it was geared more towards high school. Anyway, long story short, I went up there, I bombed, I ate it. It was terrible. I got no laughs. No one even
Wow.
clapped. No one even clapped whenever I got finished. I mean, that's just how bad I did. But it was the greatest feeling I had ever had in my life, and I was hooked. There's something about being on that stage and looking at everybody looking up at me, and me trying to figure out a way to connect with them and to manipulate their emotions in a way that they laughed. And there was just something about that I have had ever since.
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit of my background in the same subject, and then I'll let you go further. I've done improv. I was actually kind of professional, not professional, but in the city. I was in an improv troupe for 2 years, 2.5 years. And my wife insists that she could be a stand-up comedian, and I kind of half believe her. She used to hang out in Catch a Rising Star way back when, and like she dated a bunch of now famous comedians at the time, and like hung out with them. Um, did you try to break into professional comedy after that?
I
Did you? Because
I
I saw an act. The act I saw looked like you were on a circuit, right? Or
I was.
for act.
I wouldn't call it professional. What I did was, it's kind of similar to what the YouTube thing here. I saw that there were several clubs, like dance clubs, where I live in Greensboro, and
Okay, so this is
there,
this is in this is in your local area,
right, yeah,
South
in
Carolina, right?
North Carolina,
North Carolina.
and there's several big clubs that had the potential to pack out with an audience. I mean, they were. It was a college town. There's like 8 colleges in Greensboro, and so you have that untapped resource, but only 2 comedy clubs. And so what I did was I approached the manager at Green Street, which was a dance club in downtown Greensboro, and I said, "Look, you guys aren't open on Wednesday nights. Why don't you let me rent the club, or you take a cut at the door, and we'll do a comedy night there."
Oh, that's
And
cool.
so it took off. We called it sit down or stand up, and it was like for anybody that wanted to do like open mics, or you wanted to try it out, you would come and you get your time on stage, and we did it with like an elimination round. So the audience would vote, and the winners of that particular night would come back the next week and headline. So you really kind of built like a community around it. And so from there, I got approached by a couple comedy clubs and started. I did a very, very, very light tour up and down the East Coast with the Funny Bone, the club that I did my
Cool.
project with. So yeah, it was a good time. There just came a point to where I started getting into the culinary field. Like I was really, really, really into being a chef, and I had to make a decision if I wanted
Yeah,
to
like
make
like a
that.
serious chef, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, but
my buddy did that, and it was like 67 hour weeks or something like that. Like
right,
it's a
yeah, and
real commitment.
absolutely, and comedy's the same way. If you're going to be touring up and down all of these cities that you've never heard of, staying in hotel after sleazy hotel, and you've got to really want that life
Yeah,
to do it.
absolutely.
So I had to make the choice, and I
What
did.
years? What years is this roughly?
This would be from 2004 to I think my last like official stand up routine that I did um, was my farewell, what I called my farewell show. That was in 2011.
Okay. So
So
this is just a curiosity question. So you've been to New York City then? I was just curious out for my own curiosity. Have you been to New York and do you like it?
I do.
Not necessarily
Uh,
as a comedy.
I've been twice. I think the comedy there is uh, it's more raw and see everybody has their own I guess style and the audience that they're trying to connect to. Obviously, with my accent, I can't blend in New York. You know what I'm saying? So there are
Right.
certain stories that are regional that people in the South will get me because I talk a lot about the stereotypes that go along with being in the South. I loved New York City as a whole. It just the comedy and me didn't really mesh well, and
Yeah.
that's because of the accent. You know.
Right. Everyone's like, "Hey, Joey, listen to this freaking guy here." You kidding
Yeah.
me?
Forget about it. Yeah. And that they didn't have, they've never, they act like they've never heard of sweet tea. I just think that's a tragedy. I mean, an absolute
I don't think
tragedy.
that's an act. I've never heard of it either until it just came out of your mouth. I've never heard the words. I've never heard of
That's
it.
outrageous.
Sweet tea.
You're a
I
Christian.
bet
You're
you
not
there's a
supposed to lie.
lot. I don't think I was lying. I'm pretty sure I wasn't. So you didn't try to move out. You never got in your mind though to like move to California or New York and try and make it as a comedian.
No. To me, it was more of a hobby that I took more serious than a standard hobby. I never had any dreams of like, or grandiose dreams that I was going to be some big time comedian. For me, it was more about the writing. There was something about sitting down. I had a ritual where I would sit down every night and I would just write whatever was in my head. It didn't matter if it was funny, if it was not funny. Whatever was in my head, I would put down on paper, and then I would go back and a couple weeks later read what I wrote that particular night and pull from that what became my jokes. And there was something cathartic about sitting down and just writing out in a stream of consciousness. So for me, it was more like a therapy, I guess. It's a good place to rant, especially like
Right. Yeah.
now.
Well,
Yeah.
that's probably like, I mean, I don't know if you know Roseanne's original story, but she was like a housewife living in a trailer park. And she used to just, same thing you just said, late at night, she'd start writing just to keep her sanity. And, one thing led to another, and she started an act. I was going to
Absolutely.
ask you, Richard Pryor. Have you ever seen Richard Pryor?
Have I ever seen Richard Pryor? Yes, absolutely.
He's the best, right? Well, I don't know. I don't know about how many. If people still, I'm sure you being into comedy, you probably still watch like George Carlin, Richard Pryor. But I
Yes.
don't know necessarily if I say that just out on Twitter randomly, nobody would say, "Oh yeah, he's my favorite."
Oh
Someone
no.
like Jon Stewart would tell you he's his favorite comedian.
The
But
the generation that's coming below us are we can get into that later, but they're
ignorant idiots. I don't want to say that out loud. Did I say that out loud, Kyle? I didn't mean to say that
no,
out
yeah,
loud. Ignorant
they're
idiots.
it's when I think of comedy, the first person that comes to my mind is George Carlin. To me, there's not a better, more just his cadence and his ability to write. Not only funny, let's take the funny aside. His style is unmatched. Still to this day,
Yeah,
no
he's
one can
brilliant.
hold a candle to a George Carlin. Bill Hicks, of course. Jim Gaffigan, I think, is dead on. it's hard. The hardest